Hey guys, I thought it would be good to have a little bit of a look at John Newton and his testimony in the trial, the Tara Baker trial. So, John Newton currently works at the University of Georgia. He used to work at the ACCPD from 1995 to 2007. And I think he held a few different positions within the police department, including police officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant. So he seemed to me a little bit blasé when he was testifying. He didn't seem to know much, and I don't know if he was just nervous or if he thought it was um, funny or if he was trying to make it seem like Cruz, like trying to make Cruz look bad when Cruz would ask him questions and he would sort of go, "Oh, I don't remember. I don't know. Yeah, I assume we would do that." So I'm not sure what that was about. They were kind of all a bit like that. So on direct examination, they mainly asked him about the hair samples that he took. So he testified that he took head hair samples from Ashley, Valerie, and Chris Melton, and they went through those evidence numbers. And there wasn't really. Oh, and then on the 27th of Feb in 2001, apparently Newton went to the GBI office in Gainesville to collect pubic hairs from Chris. And that was about it of the substance of the direct examination, which is a bit surprising. They obviously didn't get him to review any of his reports or things before he testified, which was interesting. So then when the defense got up to ask him some questions, there was quite a lot of information that I feel was very important that obviously the prosecution didn't really want to get into. Wonder why. So the the main things, apparently he interviewed Melton a couple of days after, but also maybe on the Friday. It was a little bit unclear. I think the first time was when he said that he took fingerprints, and he said that he would have noticed the injuries on his hands if they had have been there that first time because he did the fingerprints. Side note, they lost the fingerprint card. So, yep. Anyway, but apparently during that interview, he was fidgeting a lot and he was picking at his hands because there was plumber's glue and plumber's cement apparently all over his hands because he'd been working. So, in my mind, if the injuries were sustained prior to him going to work on that Friday, then anything that he got on his hands during the day on Friday would be covering up those injuries, or at least obscuring them so that they wouldn't be so in your face as they were in the photos. So to me, that doesn't help the situation. And I think Chris's story is that when he went back to his apartment in Athens with his parents, that's when he had some emotional breakdown and punched the walls, which is how he injured his hands. There's a few problems with that. First of all, I thought he was already staying with his parents, so surely all of the things that he would have needed from his apartment in Athens, he already would have at his parents' house. So, or did they put them up in a hotel? I don't know. It's really weird. The whole thing, none of it makes sense. So there's that. And then what was the other thing? Oh, when you punch a wall, do you punch with both hands? Or do you normally just sort of like punch with one hand because you're just sort of letting out some anger, or like do a few punches all in a row? I've not punched a wall before, so I don't know. If you guys have any ideas, Cruz did a good job of questioning Chris about his hand injuries. I guess the jury believed him, which I don't understand that at all. Because if you remember, on I think it was the first day of witnesses, Dr. Falzone, the medical examiner, he was talking about the stabulation and the angles and things. And then remember when they got up to do that little presentation with the fake thing, which in my opinion was such poor taste. But if you can imagine, it was actually Chris with a K, was standing like here, and then Dr. Falzon got around the back, and you'll have to go and watch the testimony, because if I try and put it up on here, it'll probably flag it for violence or whatever. But so Dr. Falzone had his hand around the front of Chris with a K, and then was pretending to do the stabulation with the other hand. So if you look at that, and think about then if you're right-handed and there's struggling, so you're going to get the cuts on here while you're doing that, and then obviously would be the other hand. That makes so much more sense to me. And if you're going to punch a wall, you're probably going to break bones. There'll be probably a lot more swelling, and it'd be a bit more sort of localized to the knuckle area. That seems like common sense, but anyway, that was a little bit of a side track. Nash plumbing is the next problematic thing here, I think. So Chris was apparently working for Nash Plumbing, but he had an employee, which he was a subcontractor, he reckons. I don't know, it's just a bit confusing. And he couldn't give a phone number for Nash Plumbing. And back in the day, it's not like everything was on email and online like it is now. Phone numbers were, people relied on phone numbers a lot more than they do these days. So he couldn't provide a phone number. And he didn't feel comfortable with Newton going over his finances to confirm that he was employed by Nash Plumbing. Now, that is the biggest red flag. Just think about that. Why? Why would you not just give them the information? I just don't. It doesn't make any sense. Why? you don't feel comfortable with someone looking at your finances, but someone literally went and took some of your pubes. No, doesn't make sense. So I think that might be all for. Oh yeah, and then Newton didn't think, oh, maybe I should go and check this out. Maybe I should find out the number for Nash Plumbing, or maybe I should go there and try and do a bit more confirmation. But he didn't. So after watching Newton's testimony again, I had to go back to the hair mitochondrial DNA results because there is so much in there that is important. And the prosecution just skims over stuff that's they're not giving any useful information at all. So anyway, I went back and looked at the report, and I had to look again at this part of the report. So first of all, the Caucasian origin was sort of confirmed so this is the 2007 report. And then hair number 2 and hair number 3, which they've just put it as hair 2 and 4 by accident in the written part. But anyway, it's hair number 2 and hair number 3. They came from the same person, and they actually didn't match anybody. So they had 15 samples, DNA samples, and obviously they had Tara's DNA as well. So they tested all of those and they didn't match at all. So hair number 2 and hair number 3 are both from someone else. That's pretty big. Caucasian, from the same person. So who is it? Why didn't they talk about this at the trial? So what I had to do was go back to the slides from when Chris with a K did the opening statement, whatever it's called. So the sexual assault kit, this was the part that was very confusing, and it took me quite a while to get my head around it. So what they did was they took the swabs and they separated the male and female DNA. Now, that doesn't mean that the male DNA is sperm. It can be any type of male DNA because it's to do with the Y chromosome. Right. So they separate the male and the female. Now, all of them were, Tara's DNA was found on all of them. So that's the first part. That's the first fraction. And then the second fraction, for this oral swab B, there was at least 2 individuals. At least two. And Chris was not one of them. Not one of them. So they found Edrick, apparently, through CODIS from this test. So they didn't even need true allele for this one. That's how they got Edrick's name, apparently. Oh, I just thought I'd put this one in here. This is the rectal swabs because they really downplayed this, but this is the one where they only found Chris's DNA. Only. Just Chris. At least 3 individuals. But Edrick wasn't one of them. But Chris was. Make that make sense. Anyway, back to the oral swab, the first one. So partial major profile I think the way that they worded that is really misleading. Major profile just means that out of the sample that they got, there was one contributor that had a higher percentage of their DNA as part of that specific sample. So all it means is that whatever part of the sample they took, they just happened to get more of that person's DNA. And that's what they call the major contributor. And then there's the minor contributor, or more than one minor contributors. That just means that there is not as much of that DNA there. That's all it means. But they use the word major as though it's got some sort of weight to it, which really annoys me. So anyway, they got Edrick, and the other person, they don't know who that was. But they still arrested him. It's fucking crazy. So they just kept going over 2I, 2I, 2I in these slides, which is really weird. That there was no 2J. So again, here it just talks about the first fraction, Tara, because that's the female. Second fraction is male DNA, not necessarily sperm, just male DNA. So it could be like skin cells, any type of cell from a male. So, yeah. Not Chris, but someone else. And then they go on to talk about true allele to do with 2I, which is the same swab. But they didn't actually need to do true allele on this swab because they already had the supposed match just from doing the YSTR, the separating the first and second fraction. So they wanted to put this in because it looks really good, because look at all those big numbers. So they can say, yeah, it definitely matches. But all that's saying is that, yes, that is the DNA sample that we have. It doesn't tell us how the DNA got there, how long it's been there. All it tells us is that, yes, that is correct, that is who it was. That doesn't mean it wasn't planted. It's just misleading. And I know that it's the opening statements or whatever aren't evidence, but still, like, you look at that huge number, of course that's going to be impressive to the jury if they don't fucking understand it. Sorry. Anyway, I had to just go over that again because there's just this unknown person popping up on all of the evidence, including the hairs. So that's the oral swabs, the rectal swabs, and hairs too. 2 hairs of someone.